You're talking to your teen, they're looking right at you, they're nodding, and then 2 minutes later, they say, "Sorry, what?" You repeat yourself again, and when you're done, they ask you the exact thing you just told them. If that sounds familiar, it might be one of the 10 subtle signs of teen ADHD that most parents completely miss. My name is Presh, and I started Executive Function Tutors, where we've coached over 500 students, many of them with ADHD, to build systems that actually work for how their brains operate. Today, I'm walking you through all 10 signs and what to do when you spot each one. Because knowing what you're actually looking at can improve your relationship with your teen. So, what is happening when your teen says, "Sorry, what?" Sign number 1, listening but not absorbing. Here's the thing, your teen wasn't trying to ignore you. Their brain just quietly drifted somewhere else. And the tricky part is that everything on the outside still looks like they're listening. They're showing eye contact, they're nodding, and maybe even saying an aha. They're giving all the signals that say, "Hey, I'm tracking this," without the actual tracking happening underneath. Here's an easy way to test this at home. The next time you give your teen a 2 or 3-step instruction, don't repeat it. Just ask them to tell you back what you said in their own words. If they can, that's super awesome. But if they pause, look uncertain, or only catch 1 of 3 steps, then that's the gap. And that gap isn't attitude or indifference. It's what inattentive ADHD looks like in a teenager who has learned, completely by accident, that nodding gets them through most conversations. So if your teen consistently misses your instructions, even when they look like they were right there with you, that's sign number 1. Before I keep going, I want to pause for a moment. Nothing on this list is a diagnosis. ADHD can only be identified through a formal evaluation by a qualified professional. My goal with this video is to help parents understand what they're actually seeing in their teens and give them the language to describe it clearly when they sit down with their doctor, counselor, or school team. Because let's be honest, saying "I think something's off" is very hard for a clinician to act on, but saying "here are 5 specific things I've been noticing," then that's a stronger starting point. Think of these 10 signs as notes you're collecting rather than conclusions you're making. If 3 or 4 of these signs feel familiar, then that's worth checking in with your teen's doctor. And it is not a label. It's simply information. All right, let's keep going. Sign number 2, constant need for movement. This is where teenage boys and girls start to look really different. In teenage boys, hyperactivity tends to be loud and very visible. It can be bouncing their knees under the table, constantly tapping their pen or fingers on the desk, tipping their chair back, or getting up in the middle of class because sitting still for 10 minutes straight feels almost physically impossible. That's the version most people picture when they think of ADHD. And it's why teenage boys get flagged and evaluated about 3 times more often than teenage girls. In teenage girls, that same restlessness often goes inward instead of outward. Oftentimes, teenage girls are not bouncing off the walls. Instead, teenage girls are talking nonstop, interrupting teachers or friends, having so many thoughts racing at once, or playing background noise just to sit through homework because total silence feels impossible. Both teens have the same wiring underneath, but look very different on the outside. And because teenage girls with ADHD aren't as known to disrupt the classroom, teachers rarely flag it, which is a huge part of why girls are underdiagnosed. If you notice this pattern, the first shift is in how you interpret it. Your teen's need for movement is not defiance. It's actually their nervous system trying to regulate itself so it can focus. So instead of asking them to sit still, try encouraging them to connect their tasks with movement. They can review flashcards while pacing the room. If they need background noise to study, then they can put on music or a white noise playlist instead of fighting it. You might find that that version of your teen that looks the most distracted by moving, fidgeting, or humming might actually be the version that retains the most information. Sign number 3, acting before thinking it through. In teenage boys, this often shows up physically. Think riding the bike without the helmet because grabbing it felt like one extra step. In teenage girls, impulsivity tends to show up socially and verbally instead. Think blurting out something in the group chat and immediately regretting it, and oversharing something personal and then replaying it for the rest of the day. Both versions come from the same root. Their brains act before their brakes have a chance to kick in. It's not a character flaw, and it's not poor judgment on their end. Instead, it's a timing gap between their impulse and their pause. One thing that you can do to help your teen is to show them what a built-in pause looks like. Next time you're shopping around with them, instead of buying something right away, tell them that you'll buy it if you remember after 5 minutes. That small pause is often all their brain needs to think before it acts. Sign number 4, can't feel how time passes. Time feels like it moves very differently for teens with ADHD. They say, I'll do it in 5 minutes, and 25 minutes go by. They tell you homework will take 20 minutes, and it takes 2 hours. Or the opposite happens when they think a project will eat the whole weekend, so they never even started. ADHD researcher Dr. Russell Barkley calls this time blindness. That internal clock most of us use to sense how much time has passed just doesn't run the same way in an ADHD brain. It's not about them not caring. Instead, they genuinely cannot feel time the way neurotypical brains do. Oftentimes, external timers help more than internal willpower here. So next time your teen says, give me 5 minutes before dinner, don't walk away and wait. Ask them to open up their clock app and set a 5-minute timer. This is not a consequence. Instead, it turns those 5 minutes from a guess into something they can actually see. You might be surprised how much smoother that transition gets when the 5 minutes is something they can actually see running out instead of something they were supposed to feel. Sign number 5, highs too high, lows too low. This means that their emotional highs and lows are both turned up louder than everyone else's. A small change of plans, like dinner getting pushed back 20 minutes, can wreck their whole evening. Parents often describe this as having to tiptoe around eggshells. And that might look like your teen snapping at you the moment you ask them to unload the dishwasher, or disappearing to the room with headphones in for the rest of the night, not because they're defiant, but because their nervous system is already full and even a small request feels like too much. Their emotional volume knob is also set differently, and it takes more effort for them to bring it back down on their own. What actually helps in those moments is something called co-regulation, which just means your calm becomes the signal that it's safe for them to come back down. That could look like lowering your voice, staying nearby without pushing a conversation, and naming what you see without judgment, like, I can see you're overwhelmed right now. I'm here when you're ready. You're not solving the problem at that moment. Instead, you're being the steady presence that helps your teen's nervous system settle first. Quick thing before we keep going. If 2 or 3 of these are already sounding familiar, you're probably feeling that back-to-school crunch. We're putting together a back-to-school program this year built specifically for students with ADHD who deal with exactly what we're talking about in this video. Check out the link in the description to learn more. All right, let's keep going. Sign number 6. Small rejections feel huge. Your teen's friend takes an hour to text them back, and now your daughter is convinced that her whole friend group hates her. Getting a B+ to her also feels like she failed. In teenage girls, this often shows up as visible hurt, like tears, withdrawal, and spiraling thoughts about what she did wrong. But girls with ADHD are also more likely to mask the emotions tied to the rejection. On the outside, she seems fine, but she's gone quiet giving one-word answers, or making small comments toward the person who hurt her. Not to be mean, but because the pain is still sitting there, and that's the only way it's coming out. That pain is real, and it's one of the reasons rejection sensitivity in girls get mistaken for moodiness or passive aggression, rather than what it actually is. In teenage boys, that same intensity is often there, but gets covered up differently. Instead of looking hurt, teenage boys get angry or shrug it off with, "I don't even care," when the opposite is true underneath. ADHD psychiatrist Dr. William Dodson coined a term for this called rejection-sensitive dysphoria. It describes how, for a lot of people with ADHD, criticism or rejection doesn't just sting. It hits like a much bigger blow than the moment actually calls for. And here's the part most parents miss. The size of your teen's reaction isn't because they're overly sensitive. It's that their ADHD affects their brain's emotional response. What helps most isn't talking them out of their feelings at that moment. Instead, try this sentence with your teen when things have calmed down a little. "I'm not here to tell you your feelings are wrong. I just want to understand what that felt like for you." That single shift from explaining their feelings to them to trying to understand is actually what opens the door with teens with ADHD. Sign number 7, knows what to do but cannot start. I worked with a student, we'll call him Marcus, who was a varsity athlete. His coach would ask him to run sprints, and he was off the line in half a second. His teachers would then ask him to start his English essay, and he'd sit there for 45 minutes doing everything except opening his Google Doc. He'll ask to go to the bathroom, talk to his friend, and even sharpen his pencil when he doesn't need to. It wasn't that Marcus didn't care or that he was lazy. For a lot of teens with ADHD, starting a boring task is the hardest part of the whole thing, even when finishing it would only take them 20 minutes. This is called task paralysis. And from the outside, it can look very similar to procrastination, even though what's underneath is completely different. Breaking the very first step down to something almost too small, like just open the document, usually works better than telling them to start an English essay. Sign number 8, messy outside, hidden logic inside. Your teen's disorganization doesn't always look the same everywhere. You might walk into your teen's room and think it's a disaster, but ask them where something is, and sometimes they can find it. Most likely, there's a logic to how they've laid things out, even if it only makes sense to them. But that same internal system often completely breaks down when it comes to their backpack. Because a backpack is a closed, compressed space where everything gets layered on top of each other. For a teen with ADHD, opening their backpack to find one specific thing can feel genuinely overwhelming. Like being asked to find one specific receipt at the bottom of a full purse while someone is waiting on you. So they stop digging. Things stop making it back in the backpack, and suddenly nothing is where it's supposed to be. Before jumping in with a new system with your teen, try getting curious first. Ask your teen to walk you through where something goes in their backpack. You don't want to critique their process, you want to understand their existing process. Then pick just one thing to work on together. Maybe it's a single pocket that becomes the only place homework ever lives. That's it. One small change built with them, not for them. Because let's be honest, teens do not stick to systems handed to them. But something they helped figure out, that's a different story. Sign number 9, can't shift gears when needed. 3 hours into a video game or a sketchbook or a deep dive on a topic they love, and they don't hear you calling them for dinner for the 5th time. Your teen with ADHD forgets to eat. They completely lose track of time. But when you ask them for 10 focus minutes on a math worksheet, it literally feels impossible. This is one of the most confusing signs for parents, because you have proof that your teen can focus when they want to. What's actually happening is that a teen with ADHD's attention is heavily driven by interest. It's not that they're choosing to not focus on homework. It's that their brain has a harder time focusing on something that isn't as engaging. Adding a small hook of interest or competition to a boring task, like a timer challenge against themselves, can sometimes borrow some of that same hyperfocus energy. Sign number 10, struggling with sleep. Bedtime arrives and their brain does not get the memo. They're exhausted all day, and then the second the lights go out, their mind speeds up instead of slowing down. Your teen is replaying conversations, jumping between random thoughts, and suddenly remembering everything they forgot to do. This isn't them stalling on purpose. Research has actually linked ADHD to a delayed body clock and racing thoughts right at bedtime, which is part of why so many teens with ADHD say they feel most awake right when they're supposed to be winding down. And it becomes a cycle because a tired brain the next day makes every other sign on this list harder to manage. Coaching your teen to create an unwind routine that starts earlier than necessary, with screens out of the equation for the last 30 minutes, give that racing brain more time to actually slow down. So now you know the 10 signs, and hopefully a few of them just clicked into place for your own teen. But here's the next problem most parents run into. Knowing the signs is one thing, knowing what to actually do about it for your specific teen is another. That's exactly why we're building our back to school program this year, to help families turn signs like these into an actual plan for when the new school year starts. If you want to get ahead of it, you can schedule a free call with our team. The link is in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.